Hello everyone, and welcome to the final episode of our Golden Nut run. Instead of the usual format, today will be a special episode where I give a tour of the factory and give a sneak peek into the areas you haven't really seen before while we've been busy generating our millions of points. While editing the footage for this final episode, I found an old video of how the factory used to look before I got too carried away with the game, and it makes me really nostalgic to see how much growth and development there's been ever since we started this series. Everything you've seen up to this point has all been content that was recorded a while ago, but I wanted to record this short intro now to thank everybody for all their support. When I uploaded the first video in this series, it didn't get any views for a while, and I was genuinely moments away from deleting it before I noticed that it had a sudden spike in views. Since then, there's been a flood of nothing but support and positive comments, which I really did not expect. It isn't an exaggeration to say that this series only exists because of everyone who's joined and supported me along the way. I wish I had the chance to feature all the helpful tips and tricks that you've been leaving in your comments, and I plan on including as many as I can if I ever start a new playthrough. So thanks to everyone for sticking around to watch this silly little guy. I hope you enjoy the tour of the factory and witnessing all the fruits of our labor come to life. So this is the requirement for producing nuclear power. It may not seem like a ton necessarily considering the scope of what we built before, but the resources are a lot more exotic. There's a lot of machines that you don't really see on this platform supplying more parts, and we will go over the actual nuclear power plants in the future as well. Because down here, this whole section with the orange machines on this upper platform is also a part of nuclear power, producing control rods. And you see, I had to use summer sloops on these machines because I did not scale up the needs of this factory appropriately. I could go back and overclock and maybe get those 6 sloops back, but at the same time, I don't really care anymore. I'm also wasting a lot of iron converting it to steel, which is not super efficient. And as you can see, I was super proud of this 1200 rail of iron, as I'll call it, where I used 100% clocked smelters before I had access to automated supply of power shards for overclocking. So it's just funny to me how something you're impressed with often turns to can't really see it from here, but maybe I'll just cut to it. Like that little factory over there, that's kind of a similar size to the smelters, just arranged in more of a, it's less of one dimension and actually utilizes 2 dimensions better, the X and Y axis. And that produces 4,800 ingots, quadruple what this produces. But we have 2 trains providing items for our nuclear power. This one provides the uranium, I believe, and delivers the waste, and then also delivers the plutonium. You can see that we're quite heavily saturated with the uranium fuel rods here, and that's because you can't just put this waste into the awesome sink. It does not allow you to, and I understand why. But since I never had encountered anything in the past that I couldn't sink, it was like breaking the game's own convention for me, and really just ruined my day when I realized, oh, I have to make a full 3-phase nuclear power supply. And that's exactly what happened. I was sort of tempted to just make a million storage containers, and just bury it underground essentially like we do in the real world. But I decided in the spirit of things that I would try and do things appropriately. Okay, we're gonna try not to get smashed by the incoming train behind me here. But this is where most of the copper is coming from for my factory as well. I really like the way that this rail runs, and I actually wired it fairly neatly, which is actually kind of shocking to me that I spent so much time on it. But you can see that's the uranium. And it comes all the way back over here, and then goes towards that. So I do like the way that this train station looks, honestly. the way that it's somewhat symmetrical, just leading into two separate train stations. I put these on different tracks. I don't like using block signals. I don't know, they're probably efficient if you knew how to use them properly, but I would just much rather do separate rails. But this is the basis of the nuclear power, where it's actually getting consumed. We got this nice spiral track coming down, another somewhat symmetrical track that leads to the two separate stations, delivering uranium, accepting the plutonium waste, and doing both our steel, which is actually doing 3,600 ingots here, and then receiving our, I believe, plutonium waste, and delivering our fissonium fuel rods. So you can see we have our uranium here on these two rails, feeding the majority of our nuclear power plants here. They look pretty cool, but boy, do I hate the sound of the radiation. So I'm going to turn the volume down for you guys, but unfortunately I still have to listen to it. These four use our fissonium fuel rods, which are the only one that do not produce any waste. I'm seeing here that we don't really have a lot of extra ones in the belts. Usually I fill the belts here before I run the nuclear plants, but because I was having a problem with my fissonium, it just backlogged everything, but we're still getting a decent amount of fuel rods being delivered. But if you do go through the arduous task of creating nuclear power, what output should you be looking at? Well, my system isn't perfect, but I'm running 12 uranium power plants, 6 plutonium, and 4 fissonium, meaning that, at least theoretically, I should be getting over 137,000 megawatts of power. Supposedly, you can sink your plutonium fuel rods. I wish I would have known that ahead of time, as I probably wouldn't have even needed the extra power, but something for you to consider for your playthrough. As I somewhat alluded to before, I have these massive capacitor banks to store power. I wish that you could get Mark II's. 100 megawatts of power is really not that much. I mean, it's for an hour. I really don't need this much, like, to smooth any bumps in my power. I think I have like 30 or 40,000 worth of battery banks here. Yeah, 36,000 megawatt hours worth of reserve charge. So that's it for nuclear power for the most part. We will continue doing the rest of the tour. So here we have a pretty standard production of things like rubber and plastic, using my actual original train station for oil, which is kind of cool. Also being used by the oil is a massive production of coal coke. And what this is used for is diamonds, which is a very late game item, which is used to make things like time crystals. Time crystals are useful for the production of power shards, which you do automated, which saves you a lot of space in your factory late game, and it's fantastic. You know, you can just condense so much space by overclocking things at like 250%. Next up on the factory tour is our bauxite, and also adjacent to it is our battery production. The bauxite production is definitely a scaled up from our first implementation. You can see this spiral railroad track that goes way up in the air that just goes to our bauxite kind of north in the map. I like the look of this bauxite production, and it powers quite a bit of aluminum for the clad aluminum sheets and the fix-it trigons as well, which are another very useful late game part, as well as they are required for your Mark VI belts along with time crystals. Underneath this main portion of the factory has gotten messier and messier with all the belts that have been lined on the roof for the underside of our foundations, and as we've scaled up everything, it's just gotten worse and worse over time. I do kind of like the look of everything here and the complexity of it, but if you ever need to run anything new, it is just an absolute hassle to work around, and the fact that it's not easy to scale across levels. Again, at first I was a little apprehensive of train lines that went underneath my factory, but overall, I really love the look of this train as it kind of traverses underneath my factory. I think it just looks really neat, honestly, and it really hasn't gotten in the way of anything crucial. Most of the stuff under here is stuff from my old factory anyways, some of which actually isn't even being used anymore. But that's the way things go. Evolutionary spandrels are old machines that you just don't really feel like cleaning up, both for too much work for very little payoff, and also it's just nostalgic to look at in their original colors. But here is one of our earlier large-scale power plants using oil. It is a lot easier to build massive factories like this using oil, honestly, than nuclear power. Enough so that I do actually sort of regret doing nuclear power when I could have probably just went further up north, grabbed more oil, and produced the power necessary for what I actually needed to do in the end game. I just thought I would have required a lot more power. How much power, you wonder, is this oil good for? Well, with a total of 2100, I believe, we are getting quite a bit of power here. We are getting 20,000 megawatts from this oil, and this is nowhere near the maximum amount of oil on the map. If I was going to play this again and not going for the golden nut, oil is going to carry you basically the entire way. If you are going for the golden nut, you honestly might even still be able to make it. So finally, a tour of our circuit board auxiliary factory. Generally, I like to do things in the main factory because I just like having all my machines in one place, especially when they're nice and neatly organized like this. I don't know, it's just an aesthetics thing for me, but logistically, I couldn't ignore the fact that it was just so much easier to generate the circuit boards out here. Why? Because there is a heavy abundance of water available, and that allows me to not only create more copper ingots, but with water you can also create steamed copper sheets, and these are usually like 20 ingots produce 10, but you get a 1-to-1 if you mix in a little bit more water, which makes it extraordinarily worth it. You get a doubling of your resources for the same amount of ingots. I also had a lot of quartz in this area that I didn't really want to ship back because my trains are quite full. As you can see, I already have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cars on this. I should probably have more locomotives powering it, to be honest. But I've just well oversaturated that. But I do have a train here to take it back. But I just thought, well, if I can do that, I don't want to ship back the quartz and the copper sheets and just standard copper I'm not using. Let's just make the circuit boards here. So we have a grouping of 20 assemblers making all of the circuit boards that I need for my factory. As I've played the game more, I like tracks that actually go along the ground more than I do like building ones on foundation. The rides are that much more interesting, and your routes might be not quite as direct, but they just look a lot cooler in my opinion. One thing that I dearly regret is before I knew that I was going to be going for this absurd achievement, I went through and bought a lot of things that weren't necessary. I spent like anywhere from 80 to 100 tickets, and boy, am I paying for it. I definitely regret it. If you're gonna go for this absurd achievement, just be very mindful of that. But, yeah, life is good. We must find joy in these little tasks of improving efficiencies where they pop up. You know? Why? Because that's the point. Although I don't necessarily follow my own advice, I rush towards this grand, lofty goal I set for myself. Once I achieve these things, I feel empty because I don't have a goal anymore. And when I achieve the highest level goal, well then there's not a lot of point in continuing, you know? So it's all about having a goal and not necessarily about reaching it. I mean, it's important to make progress towards your goals, but achieving that goal is actually not the be-all end-all. Once you achieve that goal, you'll just have a next one, and if you assume that anything outside of the presence and experience of what you're currently doing will be anything more than what comes after it, you're just wasting your life. You gotta enjoy things now. Hello and welcome back. I did a bit of spelunking in the real world yesterday. Can you believe it? And while I did so, even though I generally don't like to do it, I let the game idle so that I could just kind of build up a bit of points. I wasn't sure how much I would actually achieve. I think the math I was using on how much points it would actually generate was well off the mark, but the reason we're back today is because I think we've done it. I think we're actually at the required amount of points to get the golden nut. Isn't that exciting? So let's check the awesome sync. I think I needed a total of about 50 tickets off camera, and as you can see, look at those 77 tickets. I'm thinking that should be enough, and again, that's pretty exciting stuff for somebody like me who's been playing this game for way too long and hasn't got the sweet release of actually achieving the goal that he's wanted to. But it is also a bit sad, because after this, there really isn't much point of me playing for much longer. So this will probably be where I leave it all, which again is kind of bittersweet. You know, I've built something that I'm proud of here. And look at that. We now have the requisite 1,000 tickets. This is what it's all been for. The golden nut. Add to cart. And let's buy it.
Congratulations, you are now a contributor to a popular Pioneer trend. In earlier testing phases of the Save the Day program, pioneers could not get enough of these nuts, to the point of featuring nuts in every single picture they took. This obsession eventually became unhealthy, and pioneers were taught the skill of restraint and not holding anything in their hands. Still, to honor the love humanity had for these nuts, a statue was commissioned, so we can honor the impact these nuts had on pioneers across the universe.
Oh, I can put it in my hand. Oh, and you can set it down. Isn't that nice? I was kind of hoping that I could use it to bludgeon things. I think this is a nice location. But isn't that nice? We did it. Thanks to everybody who joined us for our silly little journey for the golden nut. I apologize that I didn't start recording earlier. Again, I just kind of got caught up with it, and then when I was most of the way through, went, you know what? Maybe it would be interesting for people to see the effort that goes into it. If you're one of the people who have joined me in acquiring the silly little trophy, good on you, because, again, it requires a substantial amount more effort and planning than just beating the game. It really is for crazy little golden nuts like us. But if you haven't got the trophy and you just joined us along the way, thank you as well. It's been a fun ride, and I appreciate you sticking to the very end. Take care, and maybe we'll see you again soon. Who knows?